I adopted this abandoned black baby. I was shocked when the doctor told me this after doing a DNA test. It was an early spring morning when Laura opened her front door and froze in shock. There on her doorstep, bundled tightly in a worn blanket, lay a tiny sleeping baby. Laura's heart pounded as she knelt down, carefully pulling the blanket back to reveal the small face beneath. The baby had a peaceful expression, with chubby cheeks and a faint smile that tugged at her heart. She looked around, half expecting someone to appear from the bushes or a car parked nearby. But the street was empty and quiet, with just the early morning light filtering through the trees. As she scooped up the baby, she felt the weight of his small body in her arms, and a sudden wave of protectiveness washed over her. She didn't know where he came from or who had left him there, but in that moment she felt an undeniable connection to him. Laura quickly brought him inside, her mind racing with questions. Who would leave a baby here, at her home, in the middle of the night? She called the authorities, explaining the situation, but after a brief investigation, they came back with no answers. There were no clues, no notes, and no one had reported a missing child in the area. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air. Welcome back to PlotTwister. Before we unravel today's mystery, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you're always in the loop. As the days passed, Laura found herself completely taken by this little boy, whom she decided to name Milo. She noticed his big, dark eyes watching her with a kind of quiet curiosity, and a warmth filled her heart every time he reached out to her. Laura was a single woman with no children of her own, and while she had always been content with her life, something about Milo made her feel like she had been waiting for him all along. Her friends and family were both supportive and cautious, urging her to find out more about Milo's origins. But each time she looked into his eyes, Laura felt a deeper bond forming. The mystery surrounding him was undeniable, but so was the love growing in her heart. For reasons she couldn't explain, Laura felt that Milo was meant to be with her. As the weeks turned into months, Laura's life transformed around Milo. She found herself structuring her days around his needs, learning to navigate the rhythms of feeding, bathing, and soothing a baby who seemed to bring an unexpected light into her life. Every morning when she lifted him from his crib, Milo would look up at her with those large, deep eyes that always seemed to hold a wisdom beyond his years. It was as if he could understand her on a level she couldn't fully explain. Friends and family visited often, curious and supportive, each captivated by Milo in their own way. Yet they couldn't help but notice something different about him. There was a quietness to Milo, an intensity in his gaze that made him seem older than he was. Laura's best friend, Jenny, commented one evening as they watched him play with his toys. Jenny leaned closer and whispered that she'd never seen a baby so young seem so aware. Laura nodded, unable to deny it. She felt it too. Over time, Laura noticed other things about Milo that deepened her curiosity. There were certain sounds, certain words that would make him pause and look up, as though he recognized them. He had features she couldn't quite place, a unique look that made people ask again and again where he came from. But Laura had no answers. The mystery surrounding Milo only grew. One day while bathing him, Laura noticed a small birthmark-like pattern on the back of his neck. She hadn't seen anything like it before. A cluster of dots that almost looked deliberate, like a design. She touched it lightly, and Milo let out a little laugh, as if it tickled. The sight of it sent a shiver through her, and she found herself wondering again where this child came from. At night when Milo was asleep, Laura would sometimes sit by his crib, watching him breathe, and wonder about the story he couldn't yet tell her. Each passing day, her love for him grew, along with a curiosity that felt impossible to ignore. She knew this little boy was special in ways she hadn't yet begun to understand. Laura couldn't shake the questions that circled in her mind. Every time she looked at Milo, those big, searching eyes seemed to hold secrets she was desperate to uncover. Her heart was full, but her curiosity gnawed at her. She needed answers not just for herself, but for Milo. Who was he? Where did he come from? And what story lay hidden in his tiny body? One morning, after a long night of tossing and turning, she gathered her courage and took Milo to see Dr. Collins, the family doctor she had trusted for years. Dr. Collins was gentle with Milo, speaking softly as he took a small swab from inside Milo's cheek. Laura held her breath, watching, feeling as if something big was happening, something that would change everything. The doctor reassured her it would take some time, but he promised to keep her updated as soon as he had any information. The waiting began. Days stretched on, each one filled with a restless energy that Laura couldn't shake. She went through her routine with Milo, but her mind was constantly drifting, wondering what the results would reveal. She imagined all sorts of scenarios, some comforting, some strange, but all of them left her feeling both excited and anxious. Each time the phone rang, her heart would leap, only to fall again when it wasn't Dr. Collins. As the days turned into weeks, Laura began to notice subtle changes in herself. She'd sit by the window holding Milo close, her mind wandering. At night, as she slept peacefully beside her, she would lie awake, her thoughts spiraling through possibilities she couldn't put into words. Friends called to check on her, sensing her distraction, but she found herself brushing off their questions, as if speaking her worries out loud would make them too real. One afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to dip, her phone finally buzzed with a message from Dr. Collins' office. Her hand shook as she read it. The results were in, and she was to come in the next morning to discuss them in person. Laura put down the phone, her heart pounding, and looked over at Milo, who was happily babbling to himself on the floor. She took a deep breath, realizing that whatever lay ahead, she was ready to face it for him. The next morning, Laura sat in Dr. Collins' office, gripping her hand tightly in her lap. Milo was nestled against her, his small fingers clutching her sweater as he dozed. The air felt thick with anticipation, and Laura's heart thudded in her chest as she waited for Dr. Collins to speak. He sat across from her, his face calm but serious, as if he was carefully choosing his words. Dr. Collins began by explaining that Milo's DNA results were unusual. Laura's stomach tightened as he continued, describing genetic markers that were rarely seen. Markers that indicated a lineage almost unheard of. He explained that these markers were connected to an ancient indigenous community, a group so isolated and distinct that their genetic makeup was unlike anything commonly found in modern populations. Laura listened, wide-eyed, barely breathing, as the weight of his words settled in. Dr. Collins leaned forward, his voice gentle but filled with a sense of awe. He told her that Milo's lineage traced back to a people thought to have vanished from history, a group whose cultural and genetic heritage had nearly disappeared. These markers weren't just rare, they were unique to a nearly extinct lineage, almost mythical in their rarity. Laura felt a shiver run down her spine, a mix of astonishment and disbelief. She looked down at Milo, her mind swirling with questions. Dr. Collins continued, explaining that Milo's background wasn't something he'd ever encountered before. He spoke of the possibility that Milo carried traits passed down over centuries, traits that connected him to an ancient world. His tone was respectful, almost reverent, as if he recognized the significance of what Milo represented. Laura's eyes filled with tears, overwhelmed by the idea that this little boy she'd found on her doorstep held within him a connection to something so vast, so far beyond anything she'd ever imagined. When Dr. Collins finished speaking, Laura felt both humbled and astonished. She looked at Milo, sleeping peacefully in her arms, and felt a powerful surge of love mixed with awe in her heart. She knew that whatever his origins, Milo was her son. He was extraordinary, yes, but he was also just a baby in need of love and security. Laura walked out of Dr. Collins' office that day feeling a strange sense of peace mixed with awe. She held Milo tightly, his small head resting on her shoulder, as she made her way home. The doctor's words echoed in her mind, but beneath the wonder of it all, a quiet certainty had taken root. Milo's past, his unique heritage, might be extraordinary, but her love for him was simple and strong. He was her son, nothing would change that. Back at home, Laura found herself gazing at Milo as he played on the living room floor. The mystery surrounding him seemed almost surreal now, like something out of a dream. Yet here he was, a curious, joyful little boy, laughing as he stacked his blocks and knocked them over again. Laura smiled, realizing that to him, none of this mattered. He didn't know the story hidden in his DNA, the ancient roots he carried. All he knew was the warmth of her arms, the comfort of her voice, and the world they shared together. In the weeks that followed, Laura told close friends and family about Milo's heritage. Some reacted with surprise, others with fascination, but all with a respect for the deep bond they saw between Laura and her son. For Laura, sharing Milo's story brought a sense of closure, a way to honor his unique past while embracing the future they were building together. Her family rallied around her, supporting her decision to adopt Milo and officially welcome him as one of their own. The day of the adoption ceremony arrived, and Laura found herself surrounded by loved ones, all gathered to witness this special moment. Holding Milo in her arms, she felt a rush of gratitude and joy. This little boy, with his remarkable past and bright future, was hers to love and protect. As the judge pronounced them officially mother and son, tears filled Laura's eyes. The room erupted in applause, and she held Milo close, feeling her heart swell with happiness. As the ceremony ended, Laura looked down at Milo, his small hand clutching hers. She whispered softly to him, promising to help him grow with pride in who he was, to share his heritage if he wanted, and to be there for him always. For Laura, Milo's story was a gift, but their love was the real miracle. A bond unbreakable, a family formed against all odds, and a future filled with hope. What are your thoughts on the twist we uncovered today? Comment your ideas below. Make sure to like and subscribe for a daily dose of drama and mystery. See you later with another twist.